Hi, I'm Dale Sherbeck, and welcome to the HQ, a CHA Learning and Healthcare Can podcast serial where we dive into healthcare issues and topics from the perspective of its people and discuss them with those that are leading in the health system. Together, we'll try to unpack these topics and learn what actions are being taken to innovatively solve them today. As we begin this episode, which continues our series on EDI+, let me begin by saying that Healthcare Can's offices are located on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I also acknowledge and respect the fact that our member organizations provide care from coast to coast to coast on ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Now let me ask each of you who are listening whether anything I just said resonated with you. Did I have your attention? For those listening from our First Nations and Indigenous and Métis communities, did anything I say connect? Do you feel included? Did it sound performative? Does it sound like tokenism? Or do I in fact sound sincere? Why or why not? I hope that sets the stage for today's conversation about what is a land acknowledgement, what is the intended purpose, why are they important, and how might we use them to respectfully honor the land upon which we live and honor those that have lived on it for eons before us. By the end of today's conversation, I hope all of us, including other settlers like myself who live on this land, can come away with empathy and appreciation for this tradition and how to approach such an acknowledgement so that they are sincere and impactful and don't sound like a commercial before the main event. Though we're a couple months removed from the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, the inspiration for this episode came to me earlier this spring when the first guest I will introduce in a moment opened his presentation with a land acknowledgement that was like no other land acknowledgement I'd ever heard. So appreciating that truth and reconciliation is not a once-a-year activity, and we still have considerable ground to cover, yes, that's intentional, I'm very pleased to have on the HQ today two very special guests. Mike Northcott is Saskatchewan Health Authority's Chief Human Resource Officer. Mike and his team are responsible for all the human resource operations and professionals to ensure that the organization attracts, develops, and retains the best healthcare professionals for the province of Saskatchewan. Throughout his career in HR, Mike has served in various leadership positions in healthcare in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Mike holds a Master's of Human Resource Management from the University of Regina. He also has a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology and a degree and a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Saskatchewan. Mike is passionate about leadership and is a graduate of the Saskatchewan Leadership Program, the Queen's Leadership Program, and is a certified lean leader. He has served as the co-chair for the Joint Health Human Resource Committee, as a member of the Health Labour Relations Council, and a member of the Provincial Health Authority. And he believes that the most important job a leader has is developing more leaders. I'm also very honored to be joined by Andre Letendre, who is originally from Batoche, but primarily grew up in Prince Albert and now lives in Saskatoon. He is the second youngest of 7 siblings. His educational background is in human justice, and he's worked extensively with Nehiyawak and Nakayeketawak, both elders. He is mischief, and he is very proud of his heritage and has raised his children and grandchildren to be proud of their culture as well. Andre has always felt a calling to help those in need, and when he began reconciling his own life at the age of 32, he was drawn to work with federal and provincial Indigenous prisoners, as well as work in the community providing support and guidance to those who were struggling to make a change in their lives. Now that he is entering his 7th fire, he is guided to work and health to assist in making a change to the system and support healthcare workers in providing health services to First Nations and Métis patients, clients, and residents. Early in his personal reconciliation, he found that humor was very powerful in building confidence and self-worth, and he applies this to his present work. Andre is also a musician, which has also been a fundamental aspect in his healing. He writes that he is honored to do the work that he has been asked to do and appreciates the opportunity to continue to learn and grow. So hi, Mike and Andre. Welcome to the HQ.
Thanks, Dale, for the warm welcome.
Yes, I repeat that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, and again, I mean, lots of thanks here, but thanks for joining us to sort of unpack what I think for many Canadians is something that I would say we probably take for granted and haven't really stopped to think about in great detail. So, Mike, maybe as a starting point for that, I did sort of mention your sort of contemporary land acknowledgement, if we can call it that, that you had shared back with a group that we were at in the spring. I was wondering if you could share that acknowledgement again for our listeners.
For sure, I have tweaked it and updated a little bit, so hopefully that works. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity and the honor to do that. I would like to acknowledge that I reside on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. Recognizing this history is important to our future and our efforts to close the gap in health outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Land acknowledgements have become a common practice as society continues its efforts in achieving truth and reconciliation. It is important to me that land acknowledgements are meaningful, so I've taken the time to understand how I can personalize mine. I am on a learning journey, and I thank those who are supporting my learning. What I've learned is the importance and beauty of the land, as well as the interconnectedness of our ecosystem. I've learned to appreciate our land, connect with it, and how we as people interrelate with the land. Learning this has allowed me to see the gifts that the land provides us in a new way. For example, paddling down the Waskesiu River this summer, I had a new appreciation for its beauty and how my family and I were sharing it with many people and animals. Similarly, walking by the river at Wanuskewin this past September 30th gave me a new appreciation for the beauty and the value of the river. I too am grateful for the land we collectively share and the opportunities it has afforded me and my family. While I was not alive during early colonization, I acknowledge my responsibility to ensure that I contribute to systemic and structural change through my role in the Saskatchewan Health Authority and in my community. I pay my respects to the traditional caretakers of this land, and I encourage everyone to take time to continue your journey and learning surrounding truth and reconciliation.
Thanks, Mike. It's a very powerful statement, even hearing it again. Before I ask Andre in terms of what his thoughts are on what you've shared, maybe we could start with the question about what provoked you or prompted you to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So I always felt like I was going through the motions, reading reading the I'll call it prepackaged kind of land acknowledgements, and I felt awkward about it because I felt like there needs to be more meaning to this, and but I really just wasn't sure of how to do that right. I think there's a you know for myself anyway, there's a fear that you're gonna say something wrong or offend someone.
Hmm.
Um, and and so I kind of went through a journey where when I did them in kind of what I'll call a standard format, I felt really awkward about it and feeling like I really wasn't hitting the mark or doing it the justice that it rightly deserves. Um, so I went through a bit of a process where, in my own mind, trying to think about how do I do this differently. And um, I was inspired by a colleague of mine, Michelle Schmallenberg, who
Hmm.
she came to one of our executive meetings and started the day with a land acknowledgement that was really powerful and it really provided that example of courage to me, and kind of stepping out of our comfort zone to bring a lot more meaning to the land acknowledgements. And and her doing that really supported me in taking that step myself. And so I give her a lot of credit. She was an excellent leader in that regard, and I've taken components of hers because I think that they're really well done, and I've made it my own and reflected on my own journey and journey of my family. So I feel like now, when I do a land acknowledgement, it has so much more meaning, and I think that's key to truth and reconciliation. I feel like land acknowledgements are a key step. Obviously, not the extent of what needs to happen in truth and reconciliation, but a key component. So that was my journey of stepping out of my comfort zone in this space, and being inspired by a colleague who just did an excellent job in this space.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. And I think there's a lot of inspiration in that. Certainly, I take away a lot from that, and which is really, again, what sort of put in me the desire to better understand how that had come about, so I can learn from it as well. So, so Andre, when you hear Mike sort of issue an acknowledgement as he's shared with us all, as a mischief person yourself, how does that resonate with you, or how does that connect with you?
It is really encouraging for me. It's what it is. When I hear Mike's or Michelle's or many others in our provincial health authority, Saskatchewan Health Authority, it's been 5 years now, or close to 5 years, since we've all been working together. And, we, for the first time in our whole history, as First Nations and Métis people, and even Inuit, although Inuit, they're not traditional to our traditional territories here, but it's the first time that we've had a voice in a system like this, in a big system. And I'm very grateful for that. It's an opportunity. And so when I hear from what Mike was talking about in the early days in 2018, the land acknowledgements, well, that came from us. That came from, I had a part to play in that. But you have to start someplace. And that's where we started from as an organization. But over that close to 5 years, it has progressed to this type of land acknowledgement. So what's really encouraging is that when I hear stories like Mike's, and Mike and I, we've got a pretty good working relationship, very respectful of one another in that. And again, really appreciate that. Land acknowledgements, that is a really foreign concept in my language.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is that it's something that is being prescribed. And so in my language, every time that I do ceremony in the morning or throughout the day, I acknowledge the medicines that I'm using. I acknowledge the items that I'm using. I acknowledge the land that I'm on, because land acknowledgements should lead into a personal relationship between the individual and the land that they are on. So in Mike's land acknowledgement, he shows that progression from that place of awkwardness and fear. Land acknowledgements should evoke emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, probably 100% of the time, of those who are not accustomed to relating to the land as a relationship, it's going to be awkward, and there's going to be fear, because people are not intentionally trying to harm others. Okay, it's because we have been so disconnected from one another. That's why, that's where the harm comes in. So, but it's not intentional. Most times it's not intentional. Sometimes it is. You got to acknowledge that. Land acknowledgements are about relationship. And in First Nations Métis, in my culture, I should only speak about myself. And I don't, on this broadcast, I don't want to be speaking on behalf of so many different nations and individuals in that nations, that are
Mm-hmm.
First Nation, Métis, or Inuit. I'm only speaking about my simple piece of knowledge, and I don't know too much. I only know about me and what I've experienced throughout 67 years of life. But I have learned that it is a profound relationship that I had to recreate with the land, my motherland, which is Batoche, which is in central Saskatchewan. And it's historical in Saskatchewan. It's a big part of the reason on how Saskatchewan became a province. But not too many people who live and come from Saskatchewan know that. But if they begin by acknowledging that land, they will eventually get to that piece of knowledge. So it's very relational. It starts with me, relationship with myself, knowing, like Mike identified, awkward and fear. But over time, he acknowledged experiencing the courage of Michelle to be different. So he developed that in himself, you see? And with that courage, that's how we go forward. When relationships, if you don't have that relationship with the land, with yourself, and then the land and others around you, your family and community, co-workers, all of that, if we don't have that collectively, what happens is it becomes static. The relationship becomes static. And we all know when something becomes static, it dies, it disintegrates. So it has to be dynamic. So again, Mike portrayed that. He gave that message to us, or at least to me. That's what I read. What I heard was his land acknowledgements have gone from they've been very dynamic. They have gone from being prescribed, not at all personal, awkward, feared to say the wrong thing, to developing courage so that it's now a personal relationship with the land. It's his relationship with the land. Nobody else's, just his. That's what he was talking about. And because that relationship with the land he ensured that relationship with the land that he works and lives on and benefits from all of the gifts that the land will give us. And he identified some of them: the water, the animals, the trees, the food. It's just very expansive. It's a dynamic relationship. And there is no doubt that Mike's land acknowledgement will continue to evolve. It will. And that's a land acknowledgement. And when we start to do that collectively, and I'm going to put it to SHA, Saskatchewan Health Authority, if we can get the leaders to lead the way to do that and support them in doing that and encouraging them to do that, then that opens the door. Same experience that Mike had. He observed in another co-leader in the health authority that she had this courage. She did it differently. She did it in her own way. It was personalized. The more that we do that and we hear others, then it inspires us to do that, to face our fears, to face our awkwardness, to acknowledge them. And when we begin to do that, we begin to build unity. Unity. That's the gift from the land acknowledgement, is unity. Unity is a natural law. It governs everything on the land, including us as human beings who are relational to that land. We come from the earth. We come from the land. We survive because of the land. When we acknowledge it, we get the greatest gift, love, and we abide by the natural law of unity. When you have unity, there is no place for racism or intentional harm because it's very protective. And so that's very much, it comes from the cultures. I would say, and I don't know all of them, but I have traveled from coast to coast in Canada and met with many different cultures. And some of them I've lived with, in my time. And it's the same for any culture. You know, I was just yesterday, I had a meeting with, and after the meeting, we ended up staying and just dialoguing, developing a relationship. A researcher, her name is Mamata Pandey. Mike, you probably know her or have heard of her, but she does a lot of research in SHA. She's East Indian. That's her culture. And she is just recently, in the last 3 years, rediscovering her culture. And boy, you know, we both left that meeting and we felt united. We felt as one, you know, and the more we can do that, because more and more new Canadians are coming with their culture, their Indigenous. We have to be prepared for that so that we don't exclude. Because that's what happened to us as First Nations and Métis. We were excluded from that original agreement called Treaty 6 in the medicine bundle clause. It wasn't a chest, it was a bundle. And that bundle is life. But we were excluded from that. Now, basically since 2015, the TRC calls to actions gave us that opening to be a part of it all. And incidentally, Saskatchewan went through a transformation from 12 different separate identities, health authorities, into one identity. The first movement into unity. We are responsible now, the 45,000 workers in the health authority, we are responsible to make that unity, to strengthen it and make it grow. We start with land acknowledgement. That's where it all starts. So land acknowledgement is more than just the words. It's the feeling, it's the philosophy behind it, it's the interconnectedness of all of life. So it's a great land acknowledgement, Mike. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Andre. Dale, if I could just jump in with a few more comments around my journey.
Sure.
I really feel like I'm a rookie and learning in this space, and I want to be inquisitive and learn all that I can. But it's a journey. Andre has been very key to my journey, and I really thank him. We have a very strong relationship and a unique relationship, and I appreciate the coaching and mentorship that he provides me, and the learnings from those discussions, and we discuss some deep stuff, but it is key to the learning, and I thank Andre very much for as you can tell with what he's been sharing today, there's a lot of wisdom to be had there. And so we have many discussions in the past and many in the future as we progress too. And I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to say that, Andre.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Inanaskumuan, Mike. Inanaskumuan, that's a big word. It's gratitude, thankfulness, it's appreciation, it's many things. Inanaskumuan.
So I guess some of the things that I guess I'm struck by that you've been describing, I think both of you, and maybe it's, some of my own biases or assumptions around land acknowledgements before we started these conversations, is that one, I think you've really strongly emphasized, right, the importance of unity, Andre, and bringing together and creating connections and relationships, which I'm going to assume are really are foundational, or really what reconciliation is trying to bring. But the other part, I guess, is the truth, I guess, that's spoken in the land acknowledgement. And so I guess in what you're describing, Mike, is a journey towards, well, and I think you've reflected this as well, Andre, in terms of what you've heard, but as a personalization of what the land means to you personally, Mike. Not about what it means to Andre or to the other people who lived on it or lived on it before Europeans came here. So how do those two parts fit together, I guess, is what I'm trying to understand maybe. And whether, because I guess I might have previously assumed naively that a land acknowledgement was a kind of a sorry. We're here and we're sorry, and right, the emphasis on words like unceded and unsurrendered, right? So which are obviously grounded into a lot of legal connotations. But there's none of that there's some of that in your preamble, Mike, but it's not really in the acknowledgement that you've stated yourself. You're talking about your relationship with the land, which is beautiful. And that seems like that's what's really resonated with Andre. So I'm not sure who would want to take the question that I've sort of posed back, but just if either of you'd like to sort of start with that.
Go ahead, Mike. You start, I'll follow.
Okay, sounds good, Andre. I think it's a matter of being both. What I've learned throughout my learning journey thus far is the importance of the relationship with the land, the respect for the land, and how we interrelate with the land. But I'll go back to, I'll just read out one of the comments. While I was not alive during early colonization, I acknowledge my responsibility to ensure that I contribute to systemic and structural change through my role in the SHA and in my community. So through that is where I'm trying to acknowledge the history and the truth, that as we learn that truth and understand that truth, that's so key to us moving forward. Because if we don't understand what happened and acknowledge that, as difficult as that is, because when we hear about the terrible and understand about the terrible things that occurred, that's deep, and that's that gets emotions going, and that's very, it's deep, and so in my land acknowledgement, I'm trying to do both. So acknowledge the truth and the fact that I need to help to make things better in the future, and help people to understand that it's important that we understand what the truth was, because if we don't understand the truth, can we really get to reconciliation? So I don't know if I'm right on that, but that's my perspective, and really trying to balance both. So interested in Andre's perspective on that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Mike, I really appreciate your comments. You're right on the mark. You're absolutely right. And it does acknowledge the past, the truth. But we don't always have to be specific about what that truth is. What it does is it's a beginning. It's a beginning of a relationship with the traditional peoples of these traditional territories. You acknowledge them as, and at some point, Mike, understand that our department is going to change acknowledgement. We're working on that. We're going to rework that, because it's more than an acknowledgement. So I'm to carry on with that thought. I want to paint a picture in your minds. Paint a circle in 4 quadrants, and in the right-handed quadrant is identify. So what the beginnings of our land acknowledgement in SHA has been was, and let me tell you, it didn't start with land acknowledgements. It started with SHA leadership, CEO, and the board agreeing to sign a statement of commitment to work towards addressing the 7 calls to actions in health from the TRC truth and reconciliation. So when Mike and I meet, that's when we talk about the hard truth. This is what's happening, Mike. How can we fix this up? We don't have to do that publicly. Because as soon as you take it out into the public, it becomes egotistical. We want this to be personal. 45,000 employees personally taking that initiative to be responsible for the past. So you identify. So we were able to identify right in the very beginning through the statement of commitment that SHA signed, not once, but twice. They recommitted again. I want to acknowledge SHA leadership on that. And once you identify something, if you keep it to yourself, inside of yourself, it becomes cancerous. You have to acknowledge it. So the TRC somehow motivated, whatever the right word is, but SHA acknowledged the truth. That's the identity. So now we need to acknowledge it. We need to speak it out to one another, at our meetings on behalf of SHA. But it doesn't end there. Land acknowledgements will not end with what we have today, which they've grown, because everything in life moves. And as you develop that relationship with the land, it encourages you, it guides you to keep moving, keep going, because of the emotions you're being evoked, because of the thoughts, and that's going to impact everything that is in our minds, our morality, our ethics, our values, our beliefs, our standards, codes, principles, and ideals. It's a long-term process that we have started in 2018, 2017 in Saskatchewan here. And eventually, and where we are at actually is we are moving into the third quadrant, which is understand. Simply understand the history, because that's who we are. We have become that history. Once we can understand something, there's no more questions to ask, because we have a complete understanding of the situation. Then we can accept it. So the truth has not been accepted yet, but we are moving to that. There's a process. It's more than just speaking it. It's feeling it. It's living it. Every day, every minute of the day, we have to live that truth so that it becomes us. And then collectively, we're building unity throughout all of this process, you see? And can you imagine 45,000 people heading towards one ideal? Wow, powerful, I think. And we're a small province, population-wise. So that's how I understand, fundamentally how we can incorporate truth with this personal relationship. You can't have one or the other. You have to have both. And land acknowledgements here in Saskatchewan do that.
Thanks, Andre. So yeah, I think you both sort of, I think, describe how those things, I think, are intended to work in terms of, our connections to each other and building our communities. So maybe sort of feeding from that, Mike, just maybe talk about what you've very eloquently expressed your relationship with Andre and as well as your relationship with Michelle, but maybe describe your relationship with the larger relationship with your Indigenous community with when you serve and work. And what has there been, I guess, the broader response, not just to the acknowledgement, but maybe even to working with you in your work as a result of what you've been doing?
Yeah, I think I would describe it as a journey as well. The relationships that are in place are strong, and a key value of mine is respect for people, and so that just drives everything I do. And I think it lines up very, very well with exactly what we're talking about. So those relationships are there and strong, but I feel like we have a long way to go, and in developing more relationships. We're presently, embarking on um, a First Nations and Métis recruitment and retention strategy. So we're in the process of engaging those communities to hear those perspectives around how can we do better as an organization in this space, and we'll be engaging with educational institutes around once we have gathered that further feedback uh, to determine what are some of the opportunities that we see in front of us. And so I see huge opportunities for more partnerships as we move forward to work together. So when you ask around the relationships there, I would say good, but on the front end of a journey, and we've got a lot more work to do.
Fair. So it's opening a door, I guess, as much as anything, to that journey. And what about with, your broader sort of colleagues, the 45,000 people that Andre remarks on that work with SHA? I mean, those within your immediate circle, I mean, I know you've got multiple sites in many cities in Saskatchewan that you work with, so that you don't get to meet with everyone. But those that you do connect with, Mike, I mean, what has been the response of your colleagues and peers with respect to hearing your own acknowledgement?
Yeah, I guess I can describe a meeting I had with the portfolio, a WebEx meeting with the portfolio. So there was about 200 people on that call, and I shared the land acknowledgement, pretty similar to what I shared today. And I think, I got messages through the chat just saying, wow, thank you for doing that acknowledgement. It's really meaningful. And so I'm hopeful that I'm playing the role that Michelle played for me in showing others that we can do better, that it can be much more meaningful, and we just need to be a little bit brave. So I have got people notice when it's done differently, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it's I know that you, in my experience, right? I mean, and I guess to be clear, like, you were addressing a group of your peers across the country, right? Other chief human resource officers from health authorities and hospitals across the country, right? And you could hear a pin drop, I think, when you sort of had finished with that. And I know that I've talked to several since, and they've said that was the most powerful land acknowledgement they'd ever heard. So what would be your message to either those people or those that maybe weren't in that room, about how they can take up this or do this, or, how do you spread that magic, I guess, in other places?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd call it magic. I would say it's just trying to be thoughtful and learn around the meaning and how powerful land acknowledgement can be. Recognizing, land acknowledgement is just part of what we need to be doing,
Yeah.
but it's an important part, I believe. So I think it's getting out of your comfort zone and spending some time to reflect on that relationship with the land, acknowledgement of the truth, and what does that mean to you? And it's a personal, it's a very personal acknowledgement, and I think that's where it is more powerful, is when it is personal. So I appreciate your kind words, and the kind words of those that were on the call that day. But yeah, I think it's we're all on a learning journey, and we need to challenge ourselves to learn and really bring meaning to what we do.
And I think, as you framed it yourself, Andre, is that you speak for yourself and to some degree your community, but you don't, there's, many other First Nations, Métis, Inuit communities across the country which have different stories and different relationships with the land, I assume. Maybe advice from either of you, if a person wants to start on this journey that you describe you're on, Mike, and they want to do something similar, but which is authentic for themselves and their community, advice as to where they start.
Yeah, so a few options. So one is relationships. So enter relationships with those that you can learn from, and elders are so wise and such a great resource. And I know I'm fortunate to know Andre and have access to Andre and have that relationship. But I think that is a key learning opportunity, and I find it so powerful, learning and developing a relationship that you can get into those deep conversations. Because if you don't have that relationship, it's tough to just dive right in, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one avenue. I would also look to online. There's a lot of great YouTube videos on land acknowledgements, what makes them good, what doesn't. And also there's so many resources online around truth and reconciliation that that give you resources, videos, podcasts to learn. So to me it's about learning and reflection, and then how do you bring that learning and reflection back, and how do you communicate that to others to keep that cycle going, because it's something that we need to not only pay attention to, but actively talk about and help each other increase our learning.
Yeah, I think, what I learned from what you've both shared with me so far, right, is that if I was put in a position where I was asked or expected to deliver a land acknowledgement as part of an opening of an event or a speech, I don't think I would ask somebody else to write it for me, or take somebody else's words, right? I think that in itself is the problem, right?
Exactly.
And that, as you've described, and the word, well, for myself as a learning and development professional, learning is key. And if you don't know where to start, well, then that's where you need to learn, obviously, about what the history is and why these things are important, and perhaps your own relationship with your community and the land that you're on. So maybe just coming back to you then, Andre, in terms of the value of the language that's being used, right? And I know that in a conversation I'd had with you previously as well, we talked a little bit about language and that importance of that I mean, these can sound like just words, right? But they are words, and those words can be so much more impactful. So maybe describe that from your perspective, maybe to help others understand that.
Yeah, you bring up another really deep and profound topic, language. We all speak the English language. And the English language is very harsh. The English language has rules on how to use the language, and then it has rules on how to break those rules. So it's very confusing. Communication breaks down. It's not at all relational. Nehawan mina mitchif payak. Wago to win. Okay, what I just said was Nehewak, meaning the Cree people. This is the territory that I live in too, and I've worked with and related to. Part of me, my blood. Nehewak means a people. It identifies a relationship of a people with the land around them. Igwa Mechif, that's me. We are half sons to the Nehiyawak and Anishinaabe people. We are half sons. Again, relational. Peyak means one. The first thing is Wagotuin. Wagotuin is kinship, it's that relationship. So the whole language is based on relationship. So to say a land acknowledgement in the traditional languages of this traditional territories is way more meaningful, way more impactful. The challenge is to interpret that, translate it into English. Mm-hmm. So you have to be really, really selective about the words that you use and the tones that is used with those words. So in English, how do we do that in English? Well, start using words. When I first started in health in 2018, June of 2018, right around then I met Mike and many others that I continue to have a relationship with today. Michelle being one of them, as a matter of fact. You know, my words to them in English was, we need to have a paradigm shift in health. A paradigm, the way I understand a paradigm, it's an ideal that we reach for. That everything, our morals, ethics, all those things I said that make up our mind, that becomes attitude and drives our behavior, is always leading to that ideal. And so I use my culture and my cultural teachings and my languages to get this point across. So then I started asking leadership, when did we lose compassion for the work that we do? Mm-hmm. Because everybody that I've asked Mike, even in HR, why did you get into health? Everybody that I ask, it's because they have compassion to help people. Well, let's use that language. Let's use compassion. Health is all about achieving the ideal of love. We have teachings in our cultures. They're on our walls on our healing center here. Starting with respect. Mike talked about that. That's where it starts. And then 6 more or 5 more. If you give yourself those 6 values or virtues, teachings, and you apply them to your life, and you use them, use the word respect, use the word courage, use the word humility, use the word wisdom, use the truth, use honesty, use those words. You're heading towards love. Why are we so afraid to use the word love in health? Because it's a different ideal. It's a different paradigm. I'm going to say it. Every one of our health services in Canada are based on power and privilege. Privilege that gives somebody power. When that happens, if you don't understand what you have the power to oppress, exclude, harm. That's the ideal. We need to change that paradigm, the way, where are we going? To know where we are going, we have to know where we come from. Not very many people know the history of Saskatchewan, unfortunately. So I encourage leaders and frontline workers and middle managers in the health out in the community, learn about the history of Saskatchewan. Just start there. Once you know where you come from, then you start asking, why am I here? How did I get here? How did I, a Michif from Batoche, who could not speak any English in 1955 to 1960, I could not speak any English, only Michif. And then all of a sudden in 1960, my language was beaten out of me. And then I only spoke English. And I became something that I had no intentions of becoming. But the ideal in life, in my society, growing up in the 1960s, was that as a man, this is what you are, ideally, as a man in our society. And it was based on societal morals, society values, society beliefs, principles, standards, codes, and ethics. We have a long ways to go, like Mike said, because 45,000 employees need to examine what's up here in the mind, those morals. Mike is doing that. I know he's doing that because of the questions that he asks me when we meet. They're very personal to him. He's taking a risk. He's trusting me that I'm not going to harm him, because now I hold, when he comes to me in that way, guess what? I hold the privilege. I hold the power. But because I am aware of who I am, and I have cleaned up who I had become at 32 years old. So for the last 35 years, this is who I am today. I'm not going to oppress, I'm not going to harm with my privilege and my power. That's where we need to get to. How do you do that in English? It's easier to do it in our languages, because our language is based on respect, humility, family, community, which is common unity, and sharing. Sharing. So in 1976, Treaty 6, Negotiations and Agreement of the Medicine Bundle Clause, they agreed to share. That was violated, and we were left out. That's the truth. That's the truth that we're talking about. And everything else that happened started at that time in 1876. That's how it all got broken up. That's how we're in this situation in 2022, where we have to do a land acknowledgement. We have to mandate that in a health system. That is, everybody that I've talked to has come to work in health, want to work in health. Money is nice, but it's more powerful, more valuable, is that they want to give. They want to share. They want to be a community. But that ideal prevents that, you see? So we have to change that paradigm, have a paradigm shift. We don't want to get rid of the system. The system can work. We want to tweak it. We want to reshape it. That's, and you know, in 2018, when we became a department, and as far as I know, we are the only First Nations and Métis Health department in a health service in Canada, probably in the world. I don't know, but in Canada, we are. There's no other, we're very unique here in Saskatchewan. And it's a mystery. To me, it's a mystery. How did I get such a powerful voice in this health system? I shouldn't have this voice based on what I experienced in my life. I shouldn't have this, but something happened out there in that natural law of unity that it was time. And so it's all about relationships. It starts with the relationships. But first, we all have to know where we come from, how did we get here, why are we here, and what are we going to do with this now? Because everybody who works in health has privilege and power. How are you going to use that privilege and power? Because that, if you don't know that you have that, that's when it becomes harmful. And that's when you oppress. And that's when racism happens. It's a violation of that natural law of unity. And that comes from the land. So you asked a question of Mike earlier about, you know, something about how does a person begin that? My guidance to you would be go and sit out on the land and listen.
Yeah, I think to be quiet and listen is always a good choice in almost any situation. And so I'm privileged to have been able to sit here and listen to you both here today. But I think, common to both of what your stories have been, it is that need to learn, to reflect, right, to know who we are, where we came from, our history, our relationship with the land. And certainly as I reflect myself, right, it is, well, I mean, I think it's interesting in terms of the power of language, right? But I mean, the other word for land is ground, but which isn't probably quite as poetic, but we use the word ground to ground ourselves, right? To bring ourselves back to earth, to create a space of centrality or connection, and that, I think, is what I would take away, maybe as a way of closing and bringing us to an end here, is what you've all been describing, right? Is through this journey of relationships and connections and learning about ourselves and each other and creating that unity. It is that grounding, which is really, it's about the land.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dale. That is a good word, grounding. In my language, it's Mamo Ngawi Now Eski. And that means my mother, the earth. We all come from a mother. When I was growing up, that ideal that I spoke about, that I became, was to degrade woman, the life givers. And so when I reconnected with the earth, I learned that I am nothing if I spit on the earth or I raped the earth. I am nothing. I am who I had become at 32 years old. So yeah, pretty powerful. You know what, Dale? I could talk for another day and a half on this.
Well, there are more things to talk about, so I will take you up on that offer for sure, Andre. I really appreciate you being here to be part of this journey and share your wisdom and knowledge with us here today, and you, Mike, for your own vulnerability and courage, and being bold and sharing with us that journey and taking those steps to inspire others. So thank you both. I'm very grateful. And I will say Nina Nasko Mitin. I'm not sure if I got that right, but thank you.
I understood.
Thanks so much, Dale.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is wonderful. I really appreciate this opportunity to sit with Mike and co-share our learnings together, because I'm a learner as well. So thank you so much, Dale, and look forward to you sharing this podcast with us to listen to it.
Yeah, I will be very, very grateful to do so. So thank you again. Stay well, and talk to you again soon. You've been listening to the HQ, and I'm Dale Sherback, your host. You can find this and other future episodes on the CHA Learning website, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. We'd love to hear what you think, so please follow us on our other social media channels. Thanks for joining us in this discussion today. Please join us next time.